I don't doubt the aspirations of all parents in relation to their children. But I mean all parents. What we've been able to do is to make sure we release the funding to ensure that our state secondary schools have the teachers they need. And there's no point the party opposite pretending that they're interested in state education when they left them without the teaching they needed.
Dr. Reid Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You may have never seen anything like this before. The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was publicly humiliated in Parliament when he was called out for telling a blatant lie. It was a lie so outrageous that it shocked the MPs, and many couldn't believe Starmer had the audacity to say it. His comments sparked a massive reaction, and Parliament erupted with anger. The Speaker had to stand up, and you could see that Starmer was nervous about what might happen next. But what exactly did Starmer say that led to this intense backlash? Let's break down the full story, because sometimes the lies told by politicians are so unbelievable that they leave everyone in disbelief. On this particular occasion, the lie had to do with Starmer's policy of adding a tax to private school fees.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. St Hilda's Girls' School looks set to join Emmanuel Jewish Prep as the second school in Bushey alone forced to close because of Labour's VAT hike. This is a double hit to aspiration. First, the parents, many of whom not wealthy, who have described the significant sacrifices they have made to send their children to these schools. And secondly, to the excellent local state schools, including the one that I attended, which simply do not have the places, meaning this policy won't even save money. So may I therefore urge the Prime Minister, even at this late stage, to look again at the failures in this policy.
Prior to Starmer's statement at Prime Minister's questions, Ping Keys, a private school in his own constituency, had just announced that it would be shutting down because of the new tax. The Village School for Girls in Camden, which is located in Starmer's constituency of Holborn and East Pancras, publicly blamed Labour's new a T-value added tax policy and the increase in national insurance for making their school financially unsustainable. The school's administration directly pointed to Labour's tax policy as the reason they had to close their doors. Unfortunately for Starmer, this wasn't just one school. 12 private schools had already closed, and many more were expected to follow. Reports indicated that since Labour had first proposed this tax, at least 77 independent schools in England had shut down, and there was a clear trend of small and mid-sized independent schools, especially those outside London and the southeast, collapsing under the weight of Labour's tax policies. The closures were a direct consequence of the tax. Parents simply couldn't afford the steep rise in fees, and student numbers were dropping, which led to more schools shutting down. But what happened to all those students? They were forced into the already overcrowded state education system, which, as you might expect, couldn't handle the additional influx of students. Labour's policy meant to raise £1. $8 billion for the education system was supposed to be used to hire more teachers and improve state schools. It sounded good in theory. However, by forcing thousands of students out of private schools, Labour was actually placing more strain on the state education system rather than improving it. The state schools were already overcrowded, with teachers working under immense pressure, and now Starmer was pushing even more students into a system that was already struggling. This situation created more competition for places in top-performing state schools. Parents who had saved for private education now found themselves fighting for limited spaces in already oversubscribed state schools. This only increased inequality as class sizes grew and resources became even more stretched. Starmer claimed his policy was about helping working-class families, but in reality, it was making state schools worse by flooding them with even more students. As private schools closed, thousands of teachers were left unemployed, and the state schools wouldn't be able to hire them fast enough to handle the new wave of students. Yet, Starmer seemed unable to understand the negative impact of his own policies because, unlike the families affected, he had not personally been affected by such policies. In fact, Starmer's own educational background only added to the hypocrisy of his stance. When asked about his own schooling, Starmer admitted that he had attended a grammar school in the town of Sioux. What made this more ironic was that this school had become a private institution while he was attending it. And when confronted with this fact, Starmer's response was that he didn't think he even appreciated the change at the time.
I was a scholarship boy at my school and very proud of it. And I have to ask, what kind of a politician is it that sets out to make it more difficult for schools to offer exactly the kind of scholarships and bursaries that gave him such a crucial leg up in life? And the answer, of course, is Keir Starmer and the opportunity-destroying, aspiration-hating Labour Party. Read about it in my column in the Daily Mail.
So, here we have a man who now claims that private education is an unfair privilege, yet he himself attended a private school. And now, he wants to block other families from being able to make the same choice he had. This smacked of elitism. Starmer had climbed the educational ladder himself, only to pull it up behind him, denying others the same opportunities. Meanwhile, top schools like Eton, Harrow, and Westminster they would survive just fine. The real victims of Starmer's tax policy were not the super rich, as he had claimed, but middle-class families who struggled and saved to send their children to smaller independent schools. These families were now being punished by Starmer's disastrous tax plan.
The Prime Minister's decision to impose VAT on independent schools strips hard-working families of the choice for what is best for their children, while risking job losses for teachers, increasing class sizes, and squeezing state school resources to their absolute limit. With these impending threats, what actions is the Prime Minister taking to mitigate these effects if he is not undertaking an impact assessment to understand them?
Look, I do understand that many parents across the country save hard to be able to send their children to private school because they have aspiration for their children. So does every parent who sends their children to a state school. And the problem we have is we don't have enough teachers in key subjects in our state secondary school. Now, the party opposite may be prepared to tolerate that. I'm not. And that's why we've made this change to fund 6,500 teachers.
The impact of this policy was not just a matter of inconvenience. It was damaging to many families and the education system as a whole. To make matters worse, Labour's tax on private schools wasn't just unpopular. It might actually be illegal. The Independent Schools Council launched a high court challenge against the VAT policy, arguing that it violated the human rights of children and parents by disrupting their education. At the same time, some Labour imps were growing uneasy about the policy. For example, Labour MP Rupa Hugh warned that the policy was too blunt and might need to be reversed. She suggested that smaller schools should be exempt from the tax, acknowledging the harm that had already been done. Labour seemed to be in a corner, with no easy way out. If the legal challenge against the VAT tax succeeded, Starmer would be forced into an embarrassing U-turn. But if he refused to reverse the policy, Labour could be held responsible for one of the biggest education crises in modern British history. And that's exactly what happened. When one MP stood up and called on Starmer to reverse the tax, everyone in the room knew that the MP was right. It was clear that the VAT tax on private schools was wreaking havoc on the education system. Starmer could have taken the opportunity to reconsider the policy, but instead he chose to stick to his guns, even when it was obvious that the policy was causing harm.
I don't doubt the aspirations of all parents in relation to their children. But I mean all parents. What we've been able to do is to make sure we release the funding to ensure that our state secondary schools have the teachers they need. And there's no point the party opposite pretending that they're interested in state education when they left them without the teaching they needed.
Dr. Jake Ball.
Thank you, Mr.
Starmer's political deception was laid bare in Parliament. His attempt to dismiss the reality of the situation was met with an open challenge from Conservative MPs, who could no longer sit quietly while he told such blatant lies. In response, Starmer insisted, without providing any evidence, that his controversial VAT policy was not responsible for the closure of private schools. But before his words even left his mouth, reality had already proven him wrong. Conservative MP Victoria Atkins had enough and called Starmer's statement out as a lie. She shouted across the chamber, "That is a lie." The House erupted in response. Atkins, of course, had to retract her statement, as parliamentary rules don't allow MPs to directly call each other liars. But by then, it was clear that she had simply stated what everyone else in the room was already thinking.
Shh, there is no punchline. I presume something was said that shouldn't have been said. I'm sure the member would like to withdraw what was said, if they've anything about them.
Starmer had been caught red-handed denying basic facts. He was trying to gaslight the entire country into believing that his tax policies weren't destroying the very schools he had claimed would adapt. This wasn't just a routine clash in Parliament. This was a major blow to Starmer's credibility. His own lies, his failed policies, and his hypocrisy were all exposed on national television. Yet, in the face of this overwhelming evidence, Starmer's arrogance remained unshaken. Even as schools continued to close under his watch, even as parents struggled with rising fees, even as students were forced out of their classrooms, he continued to pretend that everything was fine. His refusal to acknowledge the harm his policies were causing showed just how out of touch he was. This is not the kind of leadership that Britain needs. Keir Starmer is showing himself to be a detached, elitist politician who is more interested in playing political games than actually solving the problems facing ordinary families. If he doesn't wake up soon, this education disaster could define his legacy. His downfall is coming faster than he realizes. The British public can tolerate incompetence, but what they won't stand for is dishonesty. And now, Starmer has been caught lying to the entire nation, with devastating consequences for thousands of families. What do you think? Does Starmer have the moral right to remain as Prime Minister? Isn't it true that he's tarnishing the reputation of the British Prime Minister's office and disrespecting the oath he took when he assumed office? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think he should be held accountable for the damage his policies have caused? If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We'll continue to bring you updates on British politics and how these events are shaping the future of the nation. Stay tuned for the next video.